Welcome to a very special spotlight on history in Grand Prairie. It happened in Grand Prairie is the title of our wonderful program, but this is a real special for us today. This is our history tape number 352, and this is December the 1st, 1998, and we have selected for a very special spotlight a special group in this city of Grand Prairie, Texas that have been very important to us for quite a number of years, and it's called Happy Helping Hands. And as we bring you the history of Grand Prairie, we also are weaving in the history of Happy Helping Hands, and we have two real wonderful guests for us today. And we know you've met them before in all of the activities in the city of Grand Prairie. They've worn so many different hats, but today it's the HHH hat that they're wearing. First of all, Marguerite Patton, we're so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Ruthie.
And formerly Mrs. Jerry Patton. I guess we'll have to get Jerry a good word in here, won't we?
Yes, yes.
And
indeed.
next, Mrs. Andy Anderson. And we were addressing you formerly, Miss Nancy. And Nancy, we're so glad to welcome you to the set today, my dear.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Good. All right. Happy Helping Hands. Before we talk about that and get into that, Marguerite, let's find out a little bit more about the real Marguerite Patton. Would you like out into your camera and tell us about your family? Tell us about maybe when you moved to Grand Prairie, the year, and why you moved to Grand Prairie, Texas. Did you do that?
Well, all right. My husband lived in Grand Prairie from the time of World War II. His dad worked at North American. And we met in the summer. He was a student at Texas A&M. I was living in Dallas at the time, moved back to Houston from where I went to college and high school. And we were married here in Grand Prairie in May of 1954.
How exciting!
At the First Presbyterian Church. And then, of course, being a good old Aggie, we spent 2 years in the Army.
Yeah.
And then we came back to Grand Prairie. My husband's folks lived here. And that's how come we settled here. And we have 3 sons, Wayne, Steve, and Jimmy, all grown now, and we have 4 grandchildren. Actually have 2 granddaughters and 2 grandsons.
Okay. Would you like to name them?
Our grandsons is Henry and Alexander, and our granddaughters are Jessica and Natalie.
That's wonderful. And Marguerite, in all of these years you've been in Grand Prairie, Texas, you've had that outreach personality. You've always been into things. I know you must have started in the PTA because you worked your way through the chairs and was even the president of the City Council of PTAs. Is that how you got your start into real outreach into your work into Grand Prairie?
Well, certainly. Here in Grand Prairie, I do attribute just about everything to PTA in the beginning, because when my oldest son Wayne started to school, I got involved in PTA and stayed with it. Well, I'm still in post-PTA. I guess I never really quit, but I'm not quite as active because I don't have that much time now. But
yes.
When the grandchildren are in school, I try to go to their activities.
That's wonderful. And after the PTA, you have been very involved in city activities because you've served on almost all of our real important commissions. Would you like to name the ones that you've served on?
Well, that's kind of you to say. Some temporary commissions, and but I did serve off and on for 10 years on the Grand Prairie Commission on Aging, and for 6 years on the Grand Prairie Parks and Recreation Board.
Mm-hmm. And you would have served again, but you were ineligible because when you get on there 6 years, they dump you off.
That's right, and they were kind enough to ask me to ask a city council person to rename me, but I kind of promised my husband I'm so busy during the day I would limit my nighttime.
Yes. And during all of this time, you were still working in your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. You live in a very special part of the city out where they have trees, and you're in garden club and all of this other good stuff.
Well, it's Wildwood Oaks, and it was truly wild when we moved out there in 1957. We were not in the city, and of course it has all grown now, and you have Nottingham and Meadow Oaks and all the neighboring neighborhoods. We did start Oaks and Acorns Garden Club in 1965, I believe, and I was one of the founding members of that, and it's still an active garden club.
I'm going to let you rest for a moment.
Okay.
We're going to leave you in the garden club in Nottingham area, and we're going to bring Nancy up to date. She's not quite as involved in our wonderful subject but she's been working at it almost as long as you have.
She's in most of it with me.
Nancy, would you look out into your camera and tell us about the real Nancy Anderson, and tell us about what brought you to Grand Prairie and how long you've been here?
I came to Grand Prairie in 1942. My husband went into service, and I came to live with my mother and father, who had just moved here. And I worked at North American during most of the time he was gone, and then started with Timco when that came along at the end of the war. Worked there.
Would you name your parents so we can get your maiden name? We need that.
My parents were Frank and Leela Council.
Yes.
Um,
And where did you meet your husband?
I met my husband in Clarksville in Northeast Texas, where we came from.
Wonderful.
He played softball and baseball, and since that was about the only recreation in a little rural town, I watched him play, and we met watching him play.
And he worked out at the factory during North American Aviation. Wasn't he a big wheel
No,
and something?
well, he was in service during
the war.
until after the war, when he came home in
And then he came back.
1940, December of 45, went to work at Timco, and he worked there until he died in 1966.
Yes. Well, and in your work in Grand Prairie after you retired from Timco, what got you started in all of this volunteer stuff, Nancy?
Well, if you know Marguerite Patton, you just can hardly keep away from some of this stuff. She's always been so involved in so many things, she just dragged you into it. It was wonderful that she did, because I've enjoyed it.
Well, now, you were named the Volunteer of the Year back when I believe Dwayne McGuffey was the mayor of Grand Prairie. That has been so many years ago. So you were already doing good stuff way back 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. What got you started into your community service?
I first knew Marguerite through PTA.
All right.
And she just had this project, this group that sounded interesting to me. Their main project at that time was toys, which we had bought dolls at garage sales or anywhere else, and spent the year washing and fixing those, repairing them, and making clothes for them, so that we could donate them at the Christmas, the end of the year then.
As a volunteer, I believe that you worked on the camera, on behind the camera. Here you are in front of the camera here today for the Commission on Aging.
I did. I wanted to see the Commission on Aging. That was just before I was appointed to it, but I wanted to see the meetings, and the city was not running them, so they didn't have anybody to run the camera, and I said, okay, I will learn how, and I did.
And that's the reason she get Volunteer of the Year and all this other good stuff, Marguerite. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, it is.
All right, we're going to get back with you, Nancy, in a few minutes as we pursue our subject, the Happy Helping Hands, because we know that you started out in the PTA, you worked on the Commission on Aging, you've done so many other things in the city, but now we want to get back to the history, the actual history of Happy Helping Hands. Would you document that for us, Marguerite?
Well, in 1967, and I honestly don't remember the month, there was a neighbor of ours, had a lady worked for her that qualified for county food, free food, but didn't have any way to go all the way into Dallas by Parkland Hospital to get it. And so another neighbor and myself decided, instead, we still had preschool children, that instead of having coffee at one another's house in the kitchen, we'd take our coffee in the car and we'd go pick up this lady's groceries and bring them back to her.
How nice.
And the next thing we knew, there was somebody else, another friend that knew, and before long we had about 6 cars of people going over there to pick up groceries and bring them back to Grand Prairie. And we called ourselves the Volunteers of Grand Prairie. And this was a way of identifying ourselves when we went over there to the commodity place. And then we talked to the then city manager, Clifford Johnson, State Senator Oscar Mozzie, and Glenn Coker was in charge of the county part of that at that
All right.
time. And we had a big meeting out here in Grand Prairie and asked to have a satellite place so that people wouldn't have to go clear to Dallas. And so working together with the city, they provided a place for us. And then our volunteers would go pick up the perishables on the day of distribution. The county would bring the non-perishables out the day before. Anyway, we would do that for about 2 days a month. We'd serve around 700 families. And I don't know if you remember Nora McElhaney
Yes,
worked with us, and she would go in the morning of distribution and pick up the cards because the county wouldn't let us have them but that one day so that the people could be identified.
I see.
And we did that for about 2-3 years. Bobby Fells with St. John Lutheran Church helped us too. And then food stamps came. And so that put an end to the commodity
All
program.
right.
And by this time, several of us had been working together for a long time and decided we wanted to continue to do things together. And from that is where the name Happy Helping Hands came from. And I'll be honest with you, I used to say it looks like we could think of something else different that sounded like a drinking group or
Yes,
something, you know.
yes.
But they wanted that because they said we helped people and we were happy doing it.
Yes.
So
And you used
it has
your hands
stuck.
to do all of this
Yes.
good stuff. Yes.
Now, mind you, we had no money during this time. So each time when we'd meet, we'd put $1 in the pot. So
Okay.
everything we did, we just did. We did. And as far as the toys that Nancy's talking about at first, when we'd collect dolls and dress them and clean them, that didn't really cost us very much, and we would distribute those through St. John Lutheran Church through Bobby Fells and to needy families. And that's how we got involved in that. And then about the time we were working with the Commission on Aging and the Elderly, someone found out that they were giving away free butter and cheese and stuff like this over in Irving, and why couldn't we have it in Grand Prairie? So Nancy and I checked with the North Texas Food Bank about that, and they said, well, you can't just distribute to the elderly. If you're going to distribute in Grand Prairie, you have to do it to everyone in Grand Prairie that qualifies. So we talked to AARP, and they agreed to help us with the number of volunteers that was going to take. And Bruce Long and Elva Long, his wife, who are both gone now, unfortunately, were our right hands with regards to that. And so we started doing our own distribution in Grand Prairie. We contacted the city, and the city's always worked very well with us. They furnished the trucks and picked up the commodities for us. Nancy went along and inventoried it to be sure we were getting what we were supposed to get, so they would know it was going the right place. And we were serving 700 to 800 families a month, weren't we, Nancy? And we did that until it just kind of played out. They didn't have anything anymore to distribute other than a 5-pound sack of flour, cornmeal, and a pound of butter. And we didn't feel that was really feeding people that needed help.
Yes.
And so we got out of doing that. And then in the meantime, we had started the toy program because it had come to our attention that there were children in Grand Prairie that truly were not receiving anything for Christmas. And we started that on a shoestring because we didn't have any particular monies. But by this time, people had begun to learn about us and were making donations. And we had a wonderful family in Dallas that heard about us through the Dallas Morning News, David Enright and his family. And they would, instead of sending Christmas gifts, they would contact all their friends, and those friends in turn would make donations. And he would bring us anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 before Christmas.
How wonderful.
And that's how we were able to purchase toys as well as receiving donations of toys in the beginning. But that was a little iffy. You were afraid to order them from the warehouse because you weren't sure how much money was going to come in at the last minute. But it has grown and it has worked, and that was before Santa Cop. But now that there is a Santa Cop, we work very close with them to be sure we're not serving the same families. And it has helped us because our numbers have gone down since there is someone else providing toys besides us. But
Now, under Happy Helping Hands umbrella, are you all the ones, let's ask Nancy this, the ones responsible for the funds that you get for helping boys and girls get school supplies? How does that come about, Nancy?
That's part of Happy Helping Hands budget, one item is allocated for school supplies for any child in the schools, in any of our schools in Grand Prairie that can't provide their own supplies. They contact their teacher or their counselor, and it has finally, after 8 or 9 years of the program, the counselors are the ones that I contact, and or they contact me and ask for supply. We don't know the children's names. All we know is there's a 3rd grader that needs supplies, and
In such and such school, so the schools
that's
provide
right.
that for you?
Right. And the counselors at this point then come pick up all the supplies for the children in their school. And it's mostly the first month of school before they find out those who will not be able to. And then after midterm, there's some more, of course.
Yes.
But, and we're sorry that Mott's is gone, because they
Yes.
supplied our school supplies all these years.
Well, did you purchase those from Mott's then with the
Yes.
money that you have from other sources?
Right.
Okay.
We did.
Oh, that's good. And how long did y'all do the school supply program? When did that begin? Do you remember that?
It's either 8 or 9 years.
I think it was in 80 or 81. That would be 9 years.
Yes, that would be 9 years.
90
And so
or 91.
over all of that
Oh,
time,
90, yeah, 90 or 91.
there are many, many boys and girls that have gone
Oh,
through.
we, until this year, we would spend $8,000 to $10,000 a year on school
You
supplies.
wouldn't realize how much it takes.
No.
But
It's mind-boggling how many really cannot afford
Yes.
to have just the basic school supplies.
Yes. All right, let's get back to Marguerite now. We know that you have all of these spin-off things, but you began with Happy Helping Hands with food. Now, how about this food and clothing co-op and the building you all own and all of the funds that you need to raise during the year? And when is the prime time you're called on to give things? Bring us a little bit more up to date.
Well, it was a dream of St. John Lutheran Church and Happy Helping Hands to have a co-op that all the churches and organizations could belong to that wanted to in Grand Prairie, so that we could serve more people. And in my mind's gone blank, 92, we bought a building on the corner of Northeast 4th and Church Street, and it houses the Grand Prairie Co-op.
You really did put it on the line and bought the building.
We actually bought the building.
Y'all are the owners of it.
We owned the building outright. No debt on the building.
How
We
wonderful.
were very fortunate. Through a bank, found out about the piece of property, and it was at a time when real estate was distressed, and we got it at a really good price.
Yes.
And so Happy Helping Hands is a member of the co-op, and as a member of the co-op, Happy Helping Hands pays all the overhead expenses of the co-op. That's our contribution. That is, we pay the utility bills, the insurance,
Taxes.
anything that isn't for food. We have no taxes. We're tax-free.
That's great.
And but we have a food pantry there, the co-op. We have a clothing pantry, and now we have a crisis program that helps families in crisis that try to keep them from becoming homeless. We have no public housing here. We have no emergency housing. We have no night shelter. And so we try our best to keep people in their homes, and we work with the other agencies, of course, to try to help with that.
Are you computer compatible with United Charities, the other churches that,
We are.
and how many churches do you have in your co-op?
There are 20 organizations in the co-op. 18 of them are Grand Prairie churches, and 2 of them are community service organizations, such as Happy Helping Hands and Epsilon. One of
Sigma
the
Alpha.
sororities is the other one, community service. And all the Methodist churches are members, all the Presbyterian churches are members, Seventh-day Adventist, Catholic, St. Michael's Catholic Church, the Reorganized Church Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the First Christian Church. We've got 2 smaller Baptist churches, Indian Hills and Trail Woodering. I'm afraid I probably shouldn't be trying to
Yes.
name names because I might overlook someone. But we're very proud of the membership, and everyone that is a member has a person that sits on the board of directors, and we meet once a month. It's a policy-making board.
All right, do all of these members of the co-op, do they bring you donations and money and used clothing and food and whatever? What's their role?
As they can. They fill out a membership sheet, and the churches that can, they pledge, say, you know, we'll give you $250 quarterly or whatever they feel they can do. Some churches say we'll take up special collections. Some are smaller churches and don't feel that they can do that, but they do have food drives. And some of the larger ones have food drives for that matter for us. Everyone at the co-op is a volunteer, and we depend on those member organizations to provide those volunteers.
Say that one more time.
Everyone at the Grand Prairie Co-op is a volunteer.
My next question was going to be, who do you have for staff and the paid ones and the volunteers?
There are no paid staff.
No
and
paid
there's no
staff.
paid staff in Happy Helping Hands either. It's all totally volunteer.
Volunteer.
Including Nancy and me.
Yes, and how do you get all of these volunteers? From the churches or from the community?
From these
or what?
different organizations, and of course, you being an old PTA or two know that we don't have the same volunteer place to get volunteers anymore because so many of the women work outside the home too. So we really have to depend on our retirees a lot, but we do have some younger ones that have different hours at work and so forth.
You mentioned 3 things that you have to offer from the Clothing and Food Co-op, and then this crisis thing. Do you have a lot of clothing on hand?
Well, we
What?
do because the community really supports us now.
Okay.
You know, we get food and clothing from throughout the community, not just from our member organizations.
Oh, I see.
As people have learned about us. And the community has really been very generous. And I had no idea how much room it would take for clothing.
Yes.
But it takes a tremendous amount of room, and those ladies really work hard sorting and so forth. And we did receive a nice grant, the Grand Prairie Co-op did this past year from the Levi Strauss Foundation, and we were able to buy a really secure storage building so that they're able to hold over good quality clothes from one season to another.
The clothing that you have in Grand Prairie, does that go only to Grand Prairians, or are you able to furnish that outside, like when you have flood victims and all that kind of good stuff?
Well, of course, our primary purpose is to serve the citizens of Grand Prairie in need and certain transients and homeless people. We do get more clothing than we can use, and especially as we turn over from one season to another. And we try to make it clear to the people that donate that we do try to turn those over. And there's a textile place in Dallas that sends clothing to third world countries, and they will come and pick up. And they pay us for shoes, and we have used that source for some time. Also, Children of the World that Cameron Gray and his wife Mary head up, they share things with us and we share things with them, and through them we sent boxes and boxes of clothing to Honduras and Salvador, where the people, you know, were flooded out during Hurricane Mitch. And Dorothy Brown is our clothing pantry manager, and she got all those together and took them over.
All right, now you have a clothing pantry manager. Who takes care of the food?
That's Barbara Cook.
Barbara Cook is in charge of
That's
that.
right.
Yes.
And she's and we're very fortunate to have her. She comes from.
How do you sort it all out?
She takes care of that. She weighs it, and believe me, when we give an annual report, we know down to every pound that's been donated.
In other words, you
year.
weigh your canned
That's
things,
right.
your food.
That's right. And
Well, how unusual.
And count it. And then she comes from a grocery store family. Her father was a president of the Piggly Wiggly group out of Clarksville years ago. So she knows how to turn over the food. She has 3 rooms she works from so that the dates are kept up. And sometimes people clean out their pantries and give us outdated food, and those end up in the dumpster. But she knows how to do that, and she is just a wonderful administrator. And when I said everybody's a volunteer, we have been extremely fortunate at the co-op at the quality of volunteers. Cheryl Rogers does our computer work for us, and she teaches computer science at the junior college and gives of her time. And there's, of course, everybody works. We have at least 70 volunteers. That some that may just work once a month, but on our list.
Well, what is this crisis thing?
Well, it's, as I said, it's to try to keep people in their homes. It's trying to help people the first time to not go on the welfare rolls. That maybe someone's gotten sick, gotten laid off, they're between jobs, they've gotten behind on their rent, they've gotten behind on their utility bills and so forth. And that's a completely separate fund from our food fund. If people donate to the co-op, they have to say crisis if they want it to go in the crisis fund. And it just depends on how much money we have, but we work with the other agencies, and
You know who's giving to who?
we certainly do. We certainly do. And we also network. The food pantry networks with the other food pantries in town.
What do you need for the holidays coming up? You've just gotten through Thanksgiving and the flood. What's ongoing?
Well, Barbara Cook tells me that we're in good shape for Christmas. Even right now, we will be wanting some hams and turkeys at the last minute.
Yes.
We'll be distributing the Christmas dinner fixings on Tuesday, the 22nd of December. And we'll need any contributions of meat the day before, on the 21st, if possible. And would like to know ahead of time if you're really going to do that.
All right, Nancy, I want you to sit up real straight and look real excited about this. I want you to look out and tell everyone how much you appreciate those that have given to the food co-op and the clothing co-op, and that to answer your call and to come on down and even volunteer. I'd like for you to do a pitch for me.
Oh, absolutely. That's the only way we can operate, is because we have such a big pool of volunteers who give their time. From those who interview on the front desk, those who work in the clothing room, those who work in the food part there, the administrative part. We have just wonderful volunteers, and thanks to the community, the donations that have come in, keep them busy.
All right, Marguerite,
Well, I
last minute.
Okay, but always, year-round, we need canned meats.
All right.
For the pantry, canned meats. We give a full week's supply of food to any family that comes in.
All right.
And we need that. I'd like to just quickly add that Happy Helping Hands also pays the expenses of the medical transportation to Parkland Hospital, and we work with the city on that. They do all the maintenance, and then we pay them back for it. But we take care of all the expenses,
that.
and that will continue to be free no matter what the other transportation system does.
Okay. Half a minute. Thank everyone too.
Well, I just want to thank the whole community and thank Grand Prairie for being here and allowing us to help. We get much more from it than the people that we help, I know.
Well, we want to really thank you too for helping us document the real history of Happy Helping Hands, and I guess the spin-off that has come about just from a neighborhood group getting together and two people driving over to Parkland to get commodities for one person, and now you help thousands and thousands of people. Thank you for sharing with us the history of Happy Helping Hands, and I want to thank y'all very much for being here today.
Thank you for letting us come.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.